Hey guys, welcome back to Building Ecosystems with Mr. Sarabian. Now, the last time that we were together, we were talking about limiting factors of an ecosystem. Now, a limiting factor is essentially anything that can restrict the growth or the health of an ecosystem. Now, last time we were together, we were talking about space. The amount of space is extremely important, well, because look how much we have to work with here. We have herbivores, we have piscivores, we have predators, we have prey, we have omnivores, we have eggs, we have babies, we have adults. All of this requires a ridiculous amount of space. So unfortunately, when humans start building their homes or their office buildings or their libraries or whatever they may be, that pushes animals out of that space that they require. And much like sitting in a crowded bus, those animals are going to get uncomfortable very fast. And unfortunately, when it comes to health and well-being of an ecosystem, you have one of three choices: go extinct, evolve, or move out. And 9 times out of 10, when those changes happen too fast, they're usually going to go extinct. Now, that's not the only limiting factor that can affect an ecosystem and the health and well-being of an ecosystem. Sometimes you also have invaders, creatures that don't belong there. Creatures that could start impacting the ecosystem in a way that isn't necessarily always going to be able to be predictable. And those invaders are specifically what we call invasive species. Now, an invasive species is essentially any animal that goes into an ecosystem that it typically does not belong. And unfortunately, what can happen is it can cut out the animals that would typically take up that niche. And unfortunately, what also sometimes happens is when one animal goes out, it wrecks everything. And let me give you an example. In this ecosystem, we have a perfectly well-balanced setup. We have our plant eaters, the triceratopses, and the pachycephalosaurs. We have our piscivores, which are the baryonyxes. And the good news is that they seem to sit pretty much outside of the standard food chain and food web. They don't have any interference. So the good news is that they have their own niche to work out. And of course, you have the secondary consumers, the raptors, and of course, you have the tertiary consumers, the T-Rex. Now, let's say hypothetically, all of a sudden, the T-Rex was challenged by a new predator, one that has never seen this ecosystem before, and one that's poised to take over, like the Indominus Rex. Now, P.S., the Indominus Rex is not a real dinosaur, but that's an argument that I'll save for another video. Now, let's say the Indominus Rex is brought in to this ecosystem where it doesn't belong. Now, as we all know, the Tyrannosaurus Rex wins out all the time. But let's just say hypothetically that this Indominus Rex takes out the top predator, the Tyrannosaurus Rex. Now there's a new player. And unfortunately, what that means is with the new player, the rules will sometimes change. Because unfortunately, what will happen here is that this new top predator will now be in direct competition with the top predator that's already present. So now you have two top predators vying for the food and the energy that is available in this ecosystem. Now, unfortunately, a couple of different things could happen. For one thing, this new top predator, the first thing it's going to want to do is eliminate its competition. So it is going to start going after the T-Rexes that are in this ecosystem. Now, a couple of things could happen. In one particular case, maybe the T-Rex will actually win out, and maybe it will take out the Indominus altogether. And if that happens, then it's really no big deal. And the good news is that when one new predator comes in, only a single animal comes in. That's typically what happens. But unfortunately, what starts happening in reality is that top predator or that new animal will begin to reproduce and begin to add its own population. Now, unfortunately, what happens when a new population of top predators comes in, look what's now starting to happen. We now have more tertiary consumers in this ecosystem. And unfortunately, with the higher number of tertiary consumers, that means there's going to be more mouths to feed. And unfortunately, these these primary consumers, the plant eaters, the herbivores, they don't know that all of a sudden there's a new top dog in town. They're still going to populate as they normally populate. So now, unfortunately, what's going to start happening is this new top predator is then going to start picking off all of the other animals that are present. And unfortunately, what happens if they're the first thing they're going to do, they're going to go after the main food source of the Tyrannosaurus Rex and the raptors, which is the Triceratopses and the Pachycephalosaurs. Now you have more predators, less prey available, and all that prey is just going to go away. And unfortunately, when that prey goes away, they're going to start turning on each other really fast, especially between the top predators. They're going to start fighting each other and then eventually start killing each other just for the sake of a food source. Now, you might be asking to yourself, well, what does that mean for the baryonyxes? Now, the baryonyx, they have fish. They're still doing pretty okay, right? Well, unfortunately not, because once all of these plant eaters are gone, these top predators are going to search for any food they possibly can, and that includes the baryonyxes. So once you have the plant eaters go away, you also have the secondary consumers go away, and then eventually these guys are going to directly compete with each other. And unfortunately, what might happen is now this top predator is now also going to disappear. And then what's left over? Nothing but Indominus rexes. And guess what? That has happened before. In the Great Lakes, as a matter of fact, there's actually a new invasive species of carp that is so pervasive that has completely eliminated all the other food sources. So now all that's left inside of that lake is carp. These fish are so common now. They literally explode out of the water because of their high populations. How is it that they've been able to eliminate all the other fish? Because as they swim, they eat all the time. They literally filter out the food, the algae and the plankton as they swim. That completely collapsed their entire food chain. So unfortunately, what now happens is that there's only one animal inside of that lake, the carp. And this particular ecosystem, what's left over? The Indominus rexes. And then you either have three choices: go extinct, evolve, or move on. And chances are pretty good that once all these other animals have been eliminated from the food chain and have been completely eliminated from the ecosystem, they'll either have to do one of those two things: go extinct or move on. And more often than not, they're going to die out too. Invasive species are extremely dangerous to common ecosystems, especially when you have an animal that is a generalist. It doesn't specialize in a particular habitat. It doesn't specialize in any particular food, and is able to live in multiple different environments, i.e. us humans. That's the problem. If there's one invasive species that has incurred itself upon every single ecosystem that it encroaches upon and then completely eliminates that ecosystem altogether, it's us. That's why, once again, it comes back to our responsibility, knowing all this, to make sure that we can keep better care of our health and keep better care of the health of the ecosystems that are already present. So that concludes invasive species. The last video that we're going to be covering is one that's, I guess right now, a little bit more controversial, but it is a really important limiting factor: disease. So until that time, I'm Mr. Sarabian. Stay happy, stay healthy.